WWE has had a TV PG rating since 2008, but they've been pushing that envelope recently. And in this video, we are checking out 10 TV-14 moments that WWE wish had never happened. Should be great. Let's go.
From faces that run the place getting wrapped up in rather raunchy backstage skits, to gory bloodbaths that perhaps went a little bit too far. Each and every one of these TV-14 occurrences have long since been locked away in the WWE vault, and likely won't be dusted off for a highlight package in the new era anytime soon. Gareth here from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 TV-14 moments WWE wishes never happened. Number 10, Vince McMahon takes on God. While his now even more disturbing penchants for getting up close and personal with his various talented female stars will be touched upon a little later, don't you worry. First, it's time to focus on that time the one-time boss decided to take on the almighty himself. No, not Bobby Lashley, though he did do that and won, of course. Coming in the thick of a blood feud with Shawn Michaels in 2006, Vinnie Mac did everything in his power to destroy the Heartbreak Kid, including taking aim at his beloved God, on the back of the once troubled icon turning to Christianity in his later years. And if creating his own religion by the name of McMahonism wasn't problematic enough, Vince thought it wise to throw down with the Lord himself at Backlash, teaming with his son Shane in a match against HBK and, God. Sure enough, the simply insane storyline received a ton of criticism, and McMahon didn't even put God over in his only in-ring showing. Shameful. Number 9, Eddie Guerrero gets busted up and then some. WWE definitely hasn't hesitated to salute and praise the impact the late great Eddie Guerrero had on the wrestling landscape in the years since he was suddenly taken away in 2005. However, one moment the company won't ever be in a rush to pay homage to, involving the former WWE champion Kane during one of Eddie's defenses of said strap against JBL at Judgment Day 2004. With the two warring rivals locked in a rather physical brawl, the former Brad...
This is one of the nastiest chair shots I have seen and heard. I've only seen snippets. I have not watched the full match. Anyway.
Shaw swung a steel chair at the champ's head, but instead of subtly executing a sneaky blade job that would produce a touch of colour to infuse some additional drama into the showing, Guerrero utterly botched the cut, and he soon began drowning in his own blood. The two would foolishly continue on, of course, but the frankly grotesque visual of a blood-soaked champion who was eventually rushed to hospital afterwards, pummeling his challenger to the point of disqualification, is something you definitely won't be seeing again in the latest era of TV-14. Number 8, Torrie Wilson and Stacey Keibler talk up their assets. For a whole host of reasons, the then WWF's Invasion pay-per-view payoff to a once mouth-watering years-in-the-making storyline doesn't sit as the company's finest hour by any means. And buried within the largely botched WWF versus the Alliance battles for supremacy on show was the sort of stipulation bout that has long since been erased from the promotion's history. But before Torrie Wilson and Stacey Keibler could take on Trish Stratus and Lita in said bra and panties match, the two were shoved into a backstage skit designed to get randy teenagers even more on board with the sleazy showing. From Wilson being made to squeeze hold of her breasts as the camera zoomed in, to Torrie giving Stacey a reluctant tap on her behind before letting loose a cringe-inducing "Stace, you do have a firm ass." This sort of deeply uncomfortable on-air locker room exchange was ever present at this questionable time known as 2001.
Thank God women's wrestling is nothing like this now. I'm just happy about that.
But that doesn't make these moments any less disturbing to look back on. And despite WWE definitely heading back towards more sexually charged programming recently, the dark days of women being told to perform consistently uncomfortable acts, all in the name of entertainment, look to be firmly in the past. Number 7, Mickie James gives fans the V. From breaking down barriers with her in-ring style, to calling out the frequent BS going down within the biggest wrestling promotion on the planet, to pushing the limits when it comes to the stories women were permitted to tell on a national stage. Multiple-time women's champion and surefire Hall of Famer Mickie James' legacy will be felt within the industry for many years to come. Yet one moment...
It just occurred to me that Mickie James is not in the WWE Hall of Fame, which is asinine. She should... When she's done with Impact, or maybe soon, she'll be in there.
WWE likely won't want you brushing up on when it pertains to the well-respected veteran, came in arguably her most acclaimed program to date. As James and longtime rival Trish Stratus collided over the Women's Championship at WrestleMania 22, the former opted to follow a rather raunchy impulse. That did actually fall in line with her Trish-obsessed character at the time, it must be said. However, the sight of James gesturing a V before licking her hand, after grabbing hold of her adversary's private area, surprisingly rubbed her Randy boss up the wrong way, with Vince reportedly erupting at Mickey as she got back through the curtain. Said beat was then ultimately erased from all future replays of the still gripping bout. Yep, I'm ashamed of that pun too, but moving on. Number 6, Kane charges the son of the boss. The currently blacklisted Shane McMahon's history of putting his body on the line for the sake of popular crowd is still very much front and center whenever the promotion feels the need to hype up an incoming plunder brawl or Hell in a Cell epic. However, there is actually a daring Shane O'Mac beat from those edgy TV-14 days that the company clearly deems too intense and surreal to revisit. And it just so happens to involve the current Big Red Mayor of Knox County too. With the son of the boss and Kane locked in a blood feud back in 2003, in the wake of the latter hitting a tombstone on the former's mother, as you do, Shane soon found himself at the mercy of the monstrous brother of destruction on Raw. And before McMahon knew what had hit him, he'd been cuffed, tied to the ring post, and had his nads electrocuted on national television.
Yeah, well, granted, Shane has had kids after this. I guess that was okay. It was just a tickle. I don't know.
And while this is still the same company who quite happily pretended to yank out Rey Mysterio's eyeball only a few years ago, it's safe to assume the frazzling of testicles is an awkward act that even WWE wishes they hadn't pursued. Number 5, many a hanging and choking. The rarely dull prior TV-14 era also saw a rather alarming amount of folks hanging from the neck at various points. Perhaps the most infamous instance of a star being hoisted up by their throat came on the back of The Undertaker and Big Boss Man's Hell in a Cell battle at WrestleMania 15, with the latter being yanked up high thanks to a harness he was wearing underneath his gear. Yet that still didn't stop the visual from deeply distressing those taken in the extreme image. That being said, at least it was somewhat safer than the sequence that nearly saw Gangrel very much choked to death on live TV. Once again involving the Phenom, the Brood member wasn't afforded the luxury of a harness or gimmicked rope when it came time to being strangled by the Ministry of Darkness on Raw in February 1999. Instead, Gangrel was genuinely seconds away from waving farewell to the land of the living, with Mideon's subtle intervention helping to keep an already controversial sequence from becoming that little more infamous. And it's not too difficult to see why the company has distanced themselves from the sight of hanging wrestlers in the years since this weird 99 obsession. Number 4, hot lesbian action. 2002 saw then Monday Night General Manager Eric Bischoff introduce a whole segment seemingly dedicated to some HLA. For those blissfully unaware, said acronym stood for Hot Lesbian Action, and the entire transparent attempt to pop a rating simply got more uncomfortable by the minute. Bringing in Looney Lane and Savvy, two indie workers from the Ultimate Pro Wrestling promotion, the unfortunate pair were made to strip each other down to their underwear, whilst Jerry Lawler predictably lost his mind on commentary. And with Bischoff dictating the entirely problematic action throughout, his words of sex and violence always sell would then provoke an equally controversial prolonged attack on the women courtesy of 3-minute warning. Sky Sports quickly sensed this development was a step too far from McMahon and his team, and sliced the segment from the episode entirely when it came time to air it in the UK. And with the level of backlash that was sent the company's way on the back of this lazy bid to boost ratings, you can bet WWE won't be letting loose any more unsavory HLA on Raw, SmackDown, or NXT 2.0
Yeah, I need to ask, didn't 3-minute warning have Umaga, who was, I don't remember, I think it was Jamal, and Roman Reigns' brother Rosie? Or Rosie was with Hurricane, but I don't know if he was part of this group because I think I just saw him, but let me know if I'm right.
The future. Number 3, Vince McMahon asks if you're ready for some wrestling. Vince McMahon stooped to new uncomfortable lows back in 2004 when faced with stiff Monday night opposition in the NFL. Spoofing the Monday Night Football cold open involving Terrell Owens and Nicolette Sheridan around the time, McMahon had then Intercontinental Champion Shelton Benjamin brand Trish Stratus the biggest slut on Raw, as the multiple-time women's champion sported no more than a facial mask and a towel. And if that wasn't bad enough, just as Stratus was set to mirror Sheridan's McMahon's infamous detoweling, Vince himself opted to rock up onto the scene, states how everyone knows African Americans are attracted to Canadian white women with broken noses, that he wouldn't have a locker room full of miscreants and deviants, fire further shots at the NFL, and finally have a naked Stratus dive onto his person, before sending out one last pointed, "Are you ready for some wrestling dig?" Ah, what a guy. With the former boss's reported sexual misconduct behind the scenes very much making the headlines time and time again recently, WWE will definitely continue to distance itself from this sort of troubling fantasy brought to life in the post-Vince era.
Amen.
Number 2, Candice Michelle asked John Cena if he thinks she sucks. He may have eventually become synonymous with all things PG from 2008 onwards, but that still doesn't change the fact that John Cena very much found himself at the center of many a questionable exchange in the few years he was let loose in the TV-14 arena beforehand. Away from a ton of poorly aging raps aimed at whichever sorry soul was stood opposite the mic-dropping doctor of thugonomics. Another element of the star's past pre-Super Cena has all been scrubbed from company history in the years since his rise to superstardom, and it's not difficult to see why. Routinely spearheading backstage skits which involved his female colleagues throwing themselves at the face of the company, one particularly jarring mid-2000s segment saw the then WWE champion storm into the women's locker room to seek opinions on Kurt Angle, only for Candice Michelle to ask if he thought she sucked. Cena then proceeded to bumble over himself trying to make that happen. Riveting stuff, I'm sure you'll agree, but stuff that Cena and the global brand have gone out of their way to brush under the carpet all the same. Number 1, Edge's live sex celebration. The promotion's idea to get over Edge's bold and then new rated R shtick via a live sex celebration with his real-life partner Lita has aged like a pint of full-fat milk. What's worse is that, as recently revealed by Lita herself, the company actually threatened to fire the influential talent if she didn't go through with the segment, involving her very much getting down and dirty with the then WWE champion on a 2006 episode of Raw. So despite John Cena, Edge, and a number of other WWE backstage figures all attempting to keep the scenario from going down, Vince McMahon got his wish, and Lita was forced to go through with the entire ordeal, one which would directly contribute to her departure from the company not long after. And it's no surprise all talk of the demeaning and gross Monday night moment has been kept away from the WWE sphere ever since, with many still viewing this as one of the darkest developments of the era and one that should never have made it past the pitching stage. And that's our list. Of any other TV-14 moments WWE wishes never happened? Let us know.
Funny moments also tend to happen outside of WWE. You should check that out in this video I reacted to. I will see you in another one. Peace, my G's.